So this is a small page. This shouldn't take very long. On this page, we're focusing on outliers. I think we've kind of talked about that term before, but we'll talk about it a little more in detail today. Outliers are observations that fall outside the overall pattern. We develop a more precise method for identifying outliers later in this module. For now, use your judgment to identify values that appear to be exceptions to the general trend in the data. So if you're thinking about with the cereal in the previous page, if there was a cereal that had 200 calories per serving, that would be much higher than the highest. I think the highest adult cereal had 160, I believe. Yeah, so that's pretty far out there. Or, yeah, or if it had 0 calories, I don't know. They'd probably just be an empty box then. But if it had 10 calories, that'd be way off, because I think the lowest value is 50, something like that. If you just instinctually think that seems like it's really low or really high compared to all the rest, I guess that would be called an outlier. But, you know, maybe one person wouldn't agree with another. One person might say, that seems like an outlier. And another person would say, well, it's not too far from the center, so I don't think it's an outlier. And that's kind of the problem with the term that we've coined so far. So like it says here, we'll come up with a more precise way to find outliers. I mean, how far away does it have to be from the center in order to be an outlier kind of thing? We'll figure that out later. But let's look at this example real quick here about wrist measurements. So in the distribution of wrist measurement, there are 2 women with unusually large wrists. I think I might be one of those 2 people. I didn't know they measured my wrist. Those women might be outliers. They are marked in red. The man with the smallest wrist measures in yellow, or measurement is shown in yellow. This man is probably not an outlier. Ah, okay, that's interesting. So, on the top one here, let me see. Okay, here, there's the male wrist size. Obviously, you see it kind of, all the values are more to the right, which are larger values, than in the female wrist size, which usually makes sense. I think for the most part, a male will have a larger wrist size than a female. But of course, there will always be outliers. Because I imagine the taller you are, the bigger your wrist size, you know, the shorter you are, the smaller your wrist size. And of course, there are tall women and short men, and maybe other things that contribute to a large or small wrist size. So they said, so in their minds, they're thinking that these 2 red dots down here in the female wrist size dot plot, they're outliers. They look to me fairly far away from the center or from the spread. But I guess this one's kind of hard to tell. The yellow dot in the male distribution, that seems kind of far from the center, but maybe not as far from the center in the male distribution as the 2 red ones in the female. But yeah, that's kind of tricky. We'll have to figure out a way to make it more precise. What qualifies as an outlier? You know, why do the 2 red ones qualify but the yellow one doesn't? But we'll come up with that in the future.